Hello everyone, where are you watching from today? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us go back to our main character. Tell me who the father is. Dominic Russo's voice crossed the ballroom so quietly that 300 people stopped breathing to hear it. Abigail Carter stood beneath a ceiling of crystal lights, one hand wrapped around a folder, the other resting over the curve beneath her navy dress. 5 months had passed since she had last seen him. 5 months since she had left Chicago without a goodbye, changed her number, and taught herself not to look over her shoulder every time a black car slowed near the curb. Now he was 20 feet away, dressed in a charcoal suit that fit his broad frame like armor. Dark ink climbed over his hands and vanished beneath his cuffs. Another tattoo touched the side of his neck, while a narrow mark near his temple made his handsome face seem even harder. Abigail had imagined this moment in grocery store aisles, in doctors' waiting rooms, and during long nights when the baby refused to let her sleep. In every version, she found the perfect words. Standing in the Russo Grand Hotel, she could not find one. Well? Asked Vivian Cole, the silver-haired donor who had spent the last 5 minutes treating Abigail like spilled coffee on an expensive rug. Vivian's gaze dropped to Abigail's stomach. Surely someone knows. Girls in her position rarely keep track. A few guests laughed because Vivian was rich enough to make cruelty sound fashionable. Abigail tightened her grip on the folder. She had come to save the Monroe Community Center, not defend her life before people whose watches cost more than its yearly food budget. My position, Abigail said, is standing upright in uncomfortable shoes while you confuse money with manners. Someone covered a laugh with a cough. Vivian's smile thinned. Abigail took one cautious step back and bumped into a waiter. A silver tray tilted. She caught 2 glasses against her chest, missed the third, and watched it land safely in a decorative fern. I meant to do that, she whispered. The waiter bit his lip to keep from smiling. Dominic did not. His eyes remained fixed on her, but something changed near the corner of his mouth, a memory trying to surface. Then he noticed her hand over the baby. Whatever warmth had appeared vanished. He crossed the room without rushing. People moved before he reached them. That was how Dominic ruled. He never demanded space. The world gave it to him. Vivian lifted her chin. Mr. Russo, I was only explaining that this woman entered a private event under false pretenses. Dominic took the folder from Abigail's hand and read the label. Monroe Community Center, Property Appeal. She came for a meeting, he said. You turned it into a spectacle. Vivian's face lost color. Dominic gave the folder to the hotel director, then removed his jacket and placed it around Abigail's shoulders. The gesture was careful, almost formal, yet his fingers paused near her collar as though confirming she was real. Tell me who the father is, he repeated. Abigail looked into the dark eyes she had once trusted with everything. You already know. Before he could answer, every screen in the ballroom went black. The music stopped. The doors locked with a single metallic click. Then the largest screen above the stage flickered back to life, revealing Abigail's private ultrasound image. Beneath it, 6 words appeared in white letters. The Russo child must never be born. For one suspended second, nobody moved. Then Dominic reached for Abigail, turned her away from the screen, and guided her toward a side exit while his security team sealed the ballroom. He did not raise his voice. He did not look back. The steadiness of his hand at the center of her back frightened her more than anger would have. Outside, cold Chicago air swept beneath the hotel awning. A black sport utility vehicle waited at the curb with its rear door open. Abigail stopped. I am not going anywhere with you. Dominic removed his jacket from her shoulders, folded it over one arm, and met her eyes. Someone accessed a private medical image and displayed it in a room full of people. You are coming with me until I know how. You do not get to decide that. Then decide quickly. His gaze shifted toward the hotel entrance, where guests pressed against the glass, hungry for another scene. Stay here and answer their questions, or get in the car and answer mine. Abigail climbed inside, muttering that. He had always been unbearable when he was right. Dominic sat across from her instead of beside her. The vehicle moved through downtown traffic, passing wet streets and towers glowing against the night. Neither spoke until the hotel disappeared behind them. Dominic placed the folder for the community center on the seat between them. The child is mine. It was not a question. Abigail watched the city lights slide across the window. Yes. His fingers tightened around the edge of his jacket. That was all. No accusation. No sharp demand. The silence felt worse because she could see what he was refusing to show. 5 months earlier, she had left his lakefront house before sunrise with one suitcase and a positive test hidden inside her purse. She had planned to call him after her first appointment. Then a photograph appeared beneath her apartment door. It showed Tessa leaving nursing school. A note was written across the bottom in neat black ink. Leave Chicago before Russo learns what you are carrying. Abigail changed her number that afternoon. She moved into a small rental outside Milwaukee and told everyone she needed distance after Ethan's death. Every week brought another reminder that someone knew where she was. A receipt from her grocery store. A photograph of Tessa at a bus stop. Once, a tiny pair of white baby socks arrived without a return address. Why did you not come to me? Dominic asked. Because every threat began with your name. His jaw shifted, but his tone stayed level. You believed I would hurt you. No, I believed being loved by you would. The words landed between them. Dominic looked down at his hands, at the ink covering the knuckles that had signed contracts, closed doors, and built walls around everyone he cared about. When the vehicle reached a gated house beyond the city, Abigail expected guards, orders, and locked rooms. Instead, Dominic showed her a bedroom overlooking the lake and placed a phone on the table. Call anyone you trust. Tell them where you are. She studied him. You are not taking it away? You already spent 5 months believing you had no choices. He stepped into the hallway and pulled the door nearly closed. Hours later, Abigail woke and found him asleep in a chair outside her room, his head tilted back, his arms folded, as if he had decided the safest place in the house was between her and everything else. Downstairs, Noah Bennett sat before 3 computer screens, restoring the deleted files from Abigail's old phone. At 2:17 in the morning, one message returned. Noah read it twice before carrying the screen to Dominic. The words were simple, but they changed the air in the room. Dominic Russo ordered Ethan Carter's death. Abigail found Dominic in the kitchen before sunrise, standing beside the long marble counter with Noah's restored message glowing on a tablet. The house beyond them remained dark, and Lake Michigan pressed against the windows like a sheet of black glass. Dominic turned the screen face down when she entered, but he was half a second too late. You ordered Ethan's death? Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. Dominic did not move toward her. No, that message says otherwise. A message can be written by anyone. Abigail pulled her phone from the pocket of her borrowed robe. Then explain this. She opened an audio file she had listened to so many times that every pause had become part of her memory. Dominic's recorded voice filled the kitchen. Ethan Carter knows too much. Handle it before he talks. The clip ended. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere upstairs, old pipes clicked inside the walls. Dominic rested both palms on the counter and lowered his head for a moment. The voice is mine. Abigail's eyes burned, but she refused to look away. At least you are honest about one thing. The sentence is not complete. He took the phone only after she placed it on the counter. I said Ethan Carter knows too much. Handle it before he talks to Kane's people. Get him somewhere safe. Abigail searched his face for the smallest sign of performance. She found only fatigue around his eyes and a tightness in his jaw that had not been there the night before. You expect me to believe someone removed the convenient part? No. I expect Noah to prove it. Dominic handed the phone across the counter. Noah connected it to his tablet and began examining the file. Abigail paced toward the window, then bumped her hip against a stool. She caught it before it fell and whispered, "Wonderful. Betrayal before breakfast. And now the furniture has chosen a side." A faint breath escaped Dominic, almost a laugh, but it disappeared when she faced him again. Ethan contacted me 3 weeks before he died, he said. He had financial records linking someone inside my organization to Victor Kane. He wanted protection for you and Tessa before he turned over the evidence. Why did he never tell me? Because he thought silence would keep you safe. Abigail folded her arms over herself. That seems to be every man's favorite excuse. Dominic accepted the blow without defending himself. He opened a locked drawer and removed a plain envelope. Inside was a photograph of Ethan entering a coffee shop near the river, followed by a handwritten date and time. We were supposed to meet here. He never arrived. Abigail stared at her brother's familiar crooked posture. the way one shoulder always sat higher from carrying his old messenger bag. Grief passed through her without warning, sharp enough to steal her breath. Dominic crossed the space between them, then stopped several feet away. He did not touch her. He simply remained there, close enough to catch her if she asked and far enough to let her stand alone. Noah cleared his throat. The recording was edited. For cuts, all hidden beneath background noise. Abigail pressed her fingertips against the counter. Can you identify who made it? Not yet, but I found where. Noah turned the tablet around. A location stamp appeared beneath a row of technical data. Dominic read it once, then looked toward the hallway leading to his private study. That device was inside this house, Noah said. More specifically, inside your office. Only 3 people had unrestricted access to that room. Dominic, Noah, and Eleanor Russo. Before anyone could speak, the front gate chimed. A black sedan rolled up the driveway, moving through the morning fog. Eleanor stepped from the rear door carrying a white bakery box, as though she had come for a peaceful family breakfast. She looked directly at the kitchen window and smiled. Eleanor entered the kitchen carrying a box from a bakery Abigail recognized from downtown Chicago, the kind where one pastry cost more than a full breakfast at the diner near her old apartment. She wore a cream coat, pearl earrings, and the expression of a woman who had never arrived anywhere by accident. I brought almond croissants, she said, setting the box on the counter. Dominic never eats when he is worried. Abigail looked from the pastries to Eleanor. That is thoughtful. Most people bring flowers when they suspect they might be accused of manipulating evidence. Eleanor removed her gloves one finger at a time. You have Ethan's talent for making dangerous conclusions sound charming. Dominic remained near the window, his shoulders squared, his attention fixed on the woman who had raised him after his parents died. The recording was edited in my office. Eleanor glanced at Noah's tablet, but did not ask to see it. Then your security is less impressive than everyone claims. You know more than you should, Abigail said. Eleanor turned toward her, and her gaze settled on the curve beneath the robe. There was no surprise in her face, no confusion, only calculation. You are 18 weeks, she said. Abigail felt the floor shift beneath her. I never told you that. Dominic stepped away from the window. Neither did I. Eleanor opened the pastry box as if the conversation had not changed. Pregnancy leaves patterns. Missed appointments, pharmacy records, travel under a false name. You were careful, Abigail, but fear makes people predictable. You tracked her, Dominic said. I kept her alive. Eleanor's answer came without apology. She slid a folder across the counter. Inside were bank documents, a new identity, and the deed to a house in Vermont. There is enough money here for you, your sister, and the child to live comfortably. You leave the country for 1 year, then settle wherever you choose. Dominic will never contact you. Abigail stared at the documents. You arranged all of this before asking what I wanted. What you want is not the same as what will keep you safe. Abigail pushed the folder back. I spent 5 months letting strangers make decisions for me. I am finished. Eleanor's mouth tightened. Love does not make men like Dominic gentle. It gives their enemies a target. Abigail stepped around the counter, caught the belt of her robe on the handle of a drawer, and nearly pulled the entire drawer open. She freed herself with as much dignity as possible. This house has too many objects trying to kill me. Noah looked down, hiding a smile. Even Dominic's stern expression softened for a heartbeat. Eleanor did not react. You think this is amusing? No, Abigail replied. I think being afraid every minute is exhausting, and I refuse to let you turn fear into a family tradition. Dominic moved beside her. He did not reach for her hand, but his presence made the space feel steadier. She stays. Eleanor studied him. You are choosing emotion over judgment. I am choosing not to punish her for a danger she did not create. A long pause followed. Eleanor closed the folder and lifted her chin. Then prove the child is yours. A legal record will be necessary if you intend to protect an heir. Abigail looked at Dominic. He did not study her face for signs of deception. Only if you agree, he said. That question mattered more than she expected. She gave a small nod. Eleanor made one telephone call. A private physician arrived before noon, collected the required samples, and sealed them inside a silver case. As the doctor crossed the driveway toward her car, Eleanor watched from the front window. Her phone remained hidden beside her coat. She typed one message without looking down. Make sure the result ends this. 3 days passed without a word from the laboratory, and Abigail began to suspect the house had been designed by someone who considered comfort a security risk. Every door was heavy, every window was reinforced, and every hallway contained at least one silent guard pretending not to watch her. Dominic never hovered. He simply appeared before she needed something. A softer chair replaced the narrow one in the dining room. Ginger tea appeared beside her each morning. The temperature inside the car rose by 4 degrees after she complained once that the leather seats felt like blocks of ice. He never mentioned any of it. On the 4th morning, Abigail decided to make breakfast as a peace offering. She found pancake mix, blueberries, and a skillet large enough to serve a football team. 10 minutes later, smoke rolled toward the ceiling. The alarm screamed. Metal doors opened throughout the house, and 6 security officers rushed into the kitchen while Abigail stood beside the stove holding a spatula above a pancake that looked like a burned map of Texas. Dominic arrived last, his dress shirt unbuttoned at the collar and his hair still damp. He took in the smoke, the guards, and Abigail's horrified face. "The stove attacked first," she said. One of the officers turned away to hide a grin. Dominic reached past her, switched off the burner, and opened a window. "Everyone out," he told the team. When they were alone, he examined the ruined pancake. "Is this breakfast or evidence?" Abigail stared at him. Then a laugh escaped her before she could stop it. Dominic's mouth curved, changing his entire face. For a moment, he looked less like the man Chicago feared and more like the man who once drove 40 miles at midnight because she had mentioned wanting peach pie. He prepared eggs while she cleaned the counter, and they moved around each other with the cautious rhythm of people remembering an old dance. When Abigail reached for a towel, something slipped from Dominic's shirt pocket. He caught it quickly, but not before she recognized the small black and white image. "You carry the ultrasound?" He looked at the picture, then placed it carefully beside the stove. "I missed everything else." The honesty in his voice left no room for anger. Abigail rested her palm against her stomach. A small movement pressed beneath her hand. She inhaled sharply. Dominic froze. "What happened?" "Nothing bad." She hesitated, then stepped closer. The baby moved. His gaze dropped, but he did not reach for her. "May I?" She nodded. His broad hand settled against the fabric with surprising care. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the baby kicked. Dominic's fingers spread slightly, and the hard line of his shoulders eased. "That was strong," he murmured. "Probably because the baby saw your face tattoo and decided to prepare for trouble." A quiet laugh left him, low and real. The sound had barely faded when Noah entered carrying a sealed envelope. Dominic removed his hand and opened the report. His eyes moved down the page once. Abigail watched the warmth leave his features. Noah read over his shoulder and went still. "What does it say?" she asked. Dominic turned the paper toward her. The results stated there was no biological relationship. Abigail read it twice, then shook her head. "That is impossible." Dominic studied her face, folded the report in half, and held it over the flame beneath the kettle until the corner darkened. "Then the test is lying." The last edge of the report curled into ash while Abigail watched Dominic reach for his telephone. He did not ask whether she was certain. He did not search her face for hesitation. "Noah, trace every person who handled those samples." Dominic set the burned paper inside the sink and turned off the burner. "Start with the physician." Noah was already typing. "The laboratory courier resigned this morning. His apartment is empty." Abigail wrapped both hands around her mug. "That seems extremely normal and not suspicious at all." Dominic glanced toward her. "You should stay here." "Absolutely not." "Abigail, someone changed a medical test involving my child. I am not sitting beside the lake while 3 men in dark suits solve my life for me." His gaze held hers for several seconds. Then he placed a set of car keys on the counter. "You stay beside me." It was not surrender, but it was closer than the Dominic she remembered would have come. An hour later, they left through a service gate in an ordinary gray sport utility vehicle. Dominic wore jeans, a black hooded sweatshirt, a baseball cap, and sunglasses. Abigail studied him from the passenger seat. "You understand that the hat does not make you invisible. It makes me less recognizable. You are 6 feet 4 inches tall, built like a refrigerator, and tattooed above the collar. You look less like a mob boss and more like a mob boss avoiding sunlight." Noah made a suspicious sound from The back seat that might have been a laugh. Dominic adjusted the cap lower and started the engine. The private clinic stood inside a quiet medical complex west of Chicago. Its lobby smelled of lemon cleaner and fresh coffee. The receptionist claimed the physician was unavailable, but Abigail noticed the woman glance twice toward a locked records room. While Dominic asked calm, careful questions, Abigail leaned across the counter and smiled. I am sorry to interrupt, but pregnancy has made me both emotional and unusually determined. Yesterday I cried because a grocery store stopped carrying my favorite crackers. Today I am prepared to remain in this chair until my child's records appear. She lowered herself into the nearest seat. It squeaked beneath her. This could become a very long afternoon. The receptionist looked at Dominic, then at Noah, and produced a key. Inside the records room, they found the original collection log. The identification numbers on Abigail's sample and Dominic's sample matched the report, but the transfer signatures did not. Someone had replaced the sealed package after it left the clinic. Noah photographed each page. There is also a stored blood sample from Abigail's first appointment, he said. We can send it to an independent laboratory. Dominic turned to her. Your choice. The words struck deeper than she expected. He was not giving permission. He was handing control back to her. Send it, she said. On the drive home, a dark sedan followed them through 4 turns. Dominic noticed before Abigail did. He changed lanes, took an early exit, and guided the vehicle into a busy shopping center where security cameras covered every entrance. The sedan continued past without stopping. No one spoke until Noah received a message on his tablet. I found the clinic's billing history. He leaned forward between the seats. Every appointment Abigail attended was paid before she arrived. Abigail frowned. I used insurance. Your insurance was never charged. Noah turned the screen toward them. A private account had covered every examination, every scan, and every laboratory fee. The account holder's name was hidden, but the authorization. Initials remained visible at the bottom of each payment. Eleanor Russo. By the time they returned to the lake house, Eleanor was waiting in the library with a cup of tea untouched beside her. Dominic placed the payment records on the desk between them. You funded every appointment. Eleanor glanced at the pages without reaching for them. I made certain Abigail received proper care. You altered the test, Abigail said. Eleanor's eyes lifted. I protected a child from becoming a bargaining chip. Abigail stepped closer, one hand resting beneath her stomach. You watched me panic for months. You let me believe I was alone. You were alive. That is not the same thing. Eleanor rose and smoothed the front of her gray dress. Your brother understood that survival requires unpleasant choices. The mention of Ethan tightened every muscle in Abigail's back. Do not speak about him as if you knew him. I knew enough. He entered a world he did not understand, collected information that powerful people wanted buried, and assumed good intentions would protect him. Dominic moved between them, not blocking Abigail, only changing the balance in the room. Ethan came to me for help. Abigail turned toward him. You knew he was investigating your organization? I learned 3 weeks before he died. And you never told me. He asked me not to. Of course he did. Her laugh carried no humor. Every man in my life keeps secrets, calls it protection, and leaves me to live with the consequences. Dominic took the words without interruption. His hand flexed once at his side before becoming still. I was arranging a safe place for him, you, and Tessa. He was supposed to meet me near the river, but he never arrived. No, Abigail looked at Eleanor. What did Ethan find? Eleanor lifted her cup, though she did not drink. Enough to make himself dangerous. That is not an answer. It is the only one you are ready to hear. Dominic's voice dropped. You no longer decide what she is ready for. Something passed across Eleanor's face, not fear, but the recognition that the boy she had raised was no longer standing where she had placed him. Abigail reached for her coat. Dominic shifted toward the door. Where are you going? To find someone who tells the truth before deciding whether I can handle it. Noah appeared in the hallway. Ethan had a former accounting partner named Samuel Price. He contacted me while we were at the clinic. Dominic studied Noah, then Abigail. Every instinct in him seemed to pull toward command. Instead, he removed a small tracking device from her coat pocket and placed it on the table. You knew that was there? Abigail asked. I put it there this morning. That is deeply irritating. I know. He handed her the car keys. Noah stays with you. You call if anything feels wrong. Abigail searched his face, surprised by the absence of an order. You are letting me go? I am trusting you to come back. 40 minutes later, Noah parked outside a quiet bookstore in Oak Park. Samuel Price waited in the rear reading room, a nervous man with silver glasses and ink stains on his fingers. He closed the door after Abigail entered. Your brother did not investigate Dominic Russo, he said. Ethan believed Dominic was the only person powerful enough to stop what he found. Abigail gripped the back of a chair. Then who was he investigating? Samuel placed a photograph on the table. Eleanor stood beside Victor Kane outside a private bank, their hands resting on the same sealed folder. Your brother was building a case against both of them. Samuel Price slid a second page across the table. It showed a transfer from one of Victor Kane's companies to a technology vendor hired by the Monroe Community Center. Ethan sent the evidence to an email account you used for work, he said. Abigail frowned. I check that account every day. The message was deleted before it reached your inbox. Noah leaned over the page. Who had administrator access? Abigail pictured the cramped office above the community kitchen, the humming server cabinet, and Martin Vale, the board treasurer who always complained about security costs. Martin did. Samuel gathered his papers. Ethan trusted the center because he believed no one would connect it to Dominic. He was wrong. On the drive back, Abigail called Martin and asked him to meet. At the center, he arrived 20 minutes later with his collar crooked and his hands buried in his coat pockets. Dominic was already waiting inside the empty gym, standing beneath a faded basketball banner. Martin stopped when he saw him. This was supposed to be a private meeting. It is, Abigail said. Privately explain why my brother's email vanished. Martin's eyes moved toward the exit. Dominic did not block the door. He only placed the payment record on a folding table. Martin stared at Victor Kane's company name and seemed to shrink. They threatened to close the center, he whispered. Kane's people owned the debt. They said families would lose meals, after-school care, everything. I deleted one message. I thought that was all. Abigail felt anger rise, but beneath it sat something heavier. Martin had made the same mistake everyone kept making. He had chosen for other people, then called it protection. What did the message contain? Martin opened the old server archive. The email itself was gone, but a system preview remained. Ethan had written one sentence before attaching the records. Eleanor is helping Kane move money, but she may not understand what he is building. Dominic read it twice. Ethan did not believe she was the architect. Then Victor used her, Abigail said. Or he wanted Ethan to think that. Back at the lake house, rain tapped against the kitchen windows while Noah traced the missing attachment. Dominic stood at the sink washing a shallow cut across his palm from a broken file cabinet at the center. Abigail took the towel from him. You are terrible at pretending something does not hurt. I have had practice. She wrapped his hand carefully. That does not make it a useful skill. He watched her fingers knot the cloth. I planned to leave this life before you disappeared. Abigail looked up. Why did you never tell me? I wanted to offer you a clean future, not another promise. You keep building doors and forgetting to ask whether I want to walk through them. His gaze softened. I am asking now. The distance between them narrowed, not with urgency, but with the quiet weight of everything they had lost. Dominic touched her cheek, waiting. Abigail closed the space and kissed him once, gentle and uncertain, then rested her forehead against his. Noah's voice came from the doorway. You need to see this. On his tablet, security footage showed the night the intruder entered the estate. A black vehicle paused at the gate. The barrier lifted. The camera changed angles, revealing the person who had approved access. Noah Bennett. Abigail turned toward him. Noah removed his security badge and placed it on the table. Dominic, he said, I can explain why I betrayed you. Noah kept his hands visible as Dominic approached, but he did not step back. Eleanor found records from my daughter's first year of college, he said. She made a mistake with financial aid forms. Nothing violent, nothing planned, but enough to become a federal case if the wrong person pushed it. Dominic's eyes stayed on him. So you opened my gate. I opened it for a vehicle Eleanor said carried a private investigator. I changed 3 routes, delayed 2 meetings, and fed her information that led nowhere. I thought I could protect my daughter and keep you ahead of her. Noah looked toward Abigail. I did not know Victor had replaced the driver. Abigail folded her arms. Everyone keeps making secret plans for people they claim to love. Has anyone considered trying an honest conversation? Noah lowered his gaze. Dominic remained still, though the tendons in his hand tightened beneath the bandage Abigail had tied. "Where is your daughter now?" he asked. "Safe, for the moment." Noah removed a small flash drive from his pocket. "Eleanor sent instructions this morning. She is calling a meeting with the senior families tomorrow night. She plans to force you to surrender control of the organization." "In exchange for what?" Abigail asked. Noah looked at her, and the answer arrived before he spoke. "Your safety. The baby's safety. And Tessa's." Abigail's breath caught. She reached for her telephone and called her sister. The call rang once, then ended. A second attempt went directly to voicemail. Dominic took out his own telephone. Within minutes, men across the city were checking Tessa's apartment, nursing school, and usual bus route. The reports came back empty. On Noah's flash drive was a photograph taken less than an hour earlier. Tessa sat in a quiet room beside a window, unharmed but frightened, holding a newspaper with that morning's date. Eleanor's message appeared beneath the image. "Step down before midnight tomorrow, or Abigail loses the last family member she has left." Dominic read the demand without changing his posture. Then he crossed to the desk and opened a narrow wooden case. Inside rested a heavy gold ring marked with the Russo crest. He placed it in Abigail's palm and closed her fingers around it. "This gives you authority over every person loyal to me," he said. "If I do not return, Noah follows your orders." Abigail stared at the ring. "You are going to accept her terms. Tessa comes home. You and the child remain protected. Everything else can be rebuilt. Your entire life cannot be traded away like a business contract. It is not my entire life." His gaze moved from her face to the place where their child rested. "This is—" Abigail wanted to argue, but the words failed. Dominic had spent years guarding power, as if it were the only thing no one could take from him. Now he was preparing to surrender it without hesitation. Later that night, the lake house grew quiet. Abigail carried 2 cups of coffee into the security room. She had made one exactly the way the guard preferred, with extra cream and the mild sleep aid her doctor had approved for occasional travel. 20 minutes later, the hallway cameras showed an empty chair. Abigail placed Dominic's ring on the kitchen counter beside a folded note. "Protection without choice is still a cage." She took Noah's spare keys, left through the service gate, and drove toward the address Eleanor had hidden inside the photograph's digital record. Abigail reached the address shortly before midnight and found an abandoned country club overlooking the frozen edge of a golf course. Only one room showed light. She parked beside the service entrance, slipped Noah's spare key into her coat pocket, and checked the tiny recorder hidden beneath the lining of her purse. Her hands shook, but she kept walking. Eleanor waited. Inside the old dining room at a table set for 2, a silver coffee pot stood between them, along with a plate of untouched lemon cookies. "You came alone," Eleanor said. "You wanted Dominic to surrender everything. I came to offer you another way." Abigail lowered herself into the chair and placed her purse near her feet. The recorder slid beneath the table exactly as she had planned. "Release Tessa. I will leave Chicago, and Dominic will believe the baby is not his." Eleanor studied her with quiet disappointment. "You still think this is about convincing Dominic? It is about convincing his enemies." "Then explain the false test." "A child without a Russo name has no value to them." "And the altered recording?" Eleanor's fingers tightened around the handle of her cup. "You were supposed to hear it, fear him, and disappear before he learned about the pregnancy." Abigail held her gaze. "You let me believe he had my brother killed. I let you believe what was necessary to keep you moving. That is not protection. That is cruelty with good manners." Eleanor looked toward the dark windows. For the first time, her control showed a crack. "My husband believed family made him stronger. Then our enemies learned our son's school schedule. One threat was enough to make him surrender every advantage he had. He trusted the wrong people, hesitated when he should have acted, and our child never came home." Abigail's anger softened, but it did not disappear. "I am sorry for what happened to your son. Pity changes nothing. Neither does turning Dominic into a man who has no one left." Eleanor looked down at the coffee. "He survived before you. He existed before me." The words settled between them. Abigail leaned forward, using the movement to nudge the recorder farther under the table. Her purse caught on the chair leg and fell open. A package of crackers, 2 peppermint candies, and a small bottle of antacid rolled across the floor. Eleanor stared. Abigail sighed. I planned a serious confrontation. The baby packed snacks. A reluctant smile almost touched Eleanor's mouth. Then her attention shifted to the recorder beneath the table. She had seen it. Abigail's heart quickened, but Eleanor did not reach down. Instead, she spoke more clearly. I arranged the payments. I ordered the test changed. I approved the edited file. Dominic had no part in Ethan's death. Abigail barely breathed. Then let Tessa go. I intended to. Eleanor looked toward the doorway. But she is no longer where I left her. Slow applause came from the corridor. Victor Kane entered wearing a dark overcoat and an expression far too pleasant for the hour. Two men remained behind him, while Tessa stood between them, frightened but unharmed. Eleanor rose. This meeting did not include you. That has always been your weakness, Victor said. You mistake access for control. He looked at Abigail's stomach, then at the recorder on the floor. Dominic will surrender his position for his sister-in-law. For his child, he will surrender the future. Abigail stood carefully, placing herself between Victor and Eleanor. You do not know Dominic as well as you think. Victor smiled. Neither do you. He lifted Abigail's telephone from his pocket. On the screen, a live security feed showed Dominic arriving outside the country club alone. Dominic entered the dining room alone, his coat damp from the cold mist outside. He carried no visible weapon, no briefcase, and no sign that anyone had followed him. Victor Kane smiled from the head of the table. The famous Dominic Russo arrives without an army. Dominic looked first at Abigail, then at Tessa. He checked their faces, their hands, the distance between them and the nearest door. Only after he knew they were unharmed did he acknowledge Victor. You asked for me. Victor placed a transfer agreement on the table. Your shipping companies, warehouses, financial accounts, and voting authority. Sign them over, and the women leave. Eleanor stared at the document. That was not our arrangement. Your arrangement was based on the charming belief that you were still useful. Victor pulled out a chair for Dominic. Sit. Dominic remained standing. Release Tessa first. You are not negotiating. Neither are you. You are hiding behind two women because you cannot control the people who work for you. One of Victor's men glanced toward the other. The movement was small, but Abigail noticed. Victor noticed too. His smile became thinner. Dominic signed the first page, then the second. Abigail watched his hand move steadily across the paper and understood what he was giving away. Years of power disappeared beneath a line of black ink. Victor collected the pages with visible satisfaction. That was easier than expected. You should read before celebrating, Dominic said. Victor scanned the final section. His confidence faltered. The companies had already been placed under independent legal supervision. Every account named in the agreement was frozen pending a federal investigation. You transferred nothing, Victor said. I transferred evidence. Outside, distant sirens rose through the fog. Victor turned toward Eleanor. You brought them here. No, Eleanor replied. You did. Abigail stepped closer to the table. The recorder captured everything. The false test, the altered message, the threats, and your plan to use the child. Victor looked beneath the table and saw the small device. Eleanor moved before he could reach it, placing her shoe over the recorder. You used my grief, she said. You let me believe fear was wisdom. Fear made you obedient. Not anymore. Eleanor reached for the wall switch beside the curtains and pressed the emergency alarm. Bright lights flashed across the room. The country club doors unlocked automatically, and a recorded voice directed everyone toward the exits. In the confusion, Abigail crossed to Tessa and pulled her away from the two men guarding her. Neither man followed. Dominic's earlier words had done their work. They no longer trusted Victor enough to risk their futures for him. Noah entered with federal agents and private security close behind. Victor looked around the room, calculating every possible escape, then slowly raised his empty hands. No one struck him. No one needed to. His own choices had closed every door. Dominic reached Abigail and placed one hand against her cheek. Are you hurt? No, her voice trembled. I am angry with you. I know. You came alone. I trusted you to create an opening. She looked toward the flashing alarm, then back at him. I accidentally dropped crackers during my master plan. You still created an opening. Tessa wrapped both arms around Abigail, and for one brief moment, the room contained nothing but relief. Then 3 federal agents approached Dominic. Eleanor lowered her eyes. Noah stepped forward, but Dominic stopped him with a quiet gesture. He removed the Russo ring from his pocket and returned it to Abigail's palm. "Keep this until I come home." An agent placed handcuffs around his wrists. Abigail's fingers closed over the ring. "How long will that be?" Dominic looked at her as the agents led him toward the open doors. "Long enough for me to make sure our child inherits a name worth carrying." 6 weeks later, the lake house no longer felt like a fortress, but it did not feel like home either. Abigail lived there with Tessa while federal investigators reviewed Dominic's records and Eleanor prepared her testimony. Victor Kane remained in custody, and the companies he had used to move money were being dismantled one account at a time. Dominic had been released under strict supervision because he was cooperating, but he stayed in a small apartment near the courthouse instead of returning to the house. He called every evening at 7. He never asked Abigail to forgive him. He asked whether she had eaten, whether the baby was moving, and whether the heating system still made that terrible sound near midnight. He sent no jewelry and made no dramatic promises. One morning, a delivery driver brought a box containing the lemon crackers Abigail had searched for in 3 grocery stores. There was no note. She knew who had remembered. The independent laboratory result arrived on a rainy Thursday. Abigail opened it at the kitchen table with Tessa beside her and Dominic listening through the telephone. The report confirmed what all 3 of them already knew. Dominic was the father. He said nothing for several seconds. Then Abigail heard a slow breath leave him. "May I have a copy?" he asked. "Why? I missed the first one." She printed another copy and mailed it before she could change her mind. Trust did not return in one grand moment. It came through small choices. Dominic told her where he was going before she asked. He admitted when he did not know an answer. When Abigail disagreed with him, he listened instead of turning concern into an order. She began answering his calls before the final ring. On a Sunday afternoon, he joined her for a medical appointment. He sat in a chair that looked far too small beneath him and held the ultrasound photograph as carefully as if it were made of glass. 2 weeks later, a storm moved across Chicago with heavy rain and wind strong enough to bend the trees beside the lake. Abigail was in the kitchen trying to open a jar of peanut butter when a sudden pressure stopped her. The jar slipped from her hands and rolled beneath the table. "Tessa," she called. Her sister hurried in, took one look at her face, and reached for the hospital bag. The drive should have taken 20 minutes. Flooded streets turned it into nearly an hour. Abigail gripped the seat belt and tried to breathe through each wave of discomfort. "This child has Dominic's sense of timing," she said. "Dramatic and completely inconvenient." Tessa laughed, though her eyes remained worried. At the hospital, nurses moved quickly. Abigail kept looking toward the door while telling herself not to. Dominic had a federal hearing across town. Missing it could damage the agreement that kept him free. Another wave passed, and Abigail closed her eyes. When she opened them, the door swung inward. Dominic stood there without his usual suit, his white shirt damp from the rain and a hospital band already fastened around his wrist. He crossed the room, stopped beside the bed, and offered his hand instead of taking hers. Abigail placed her fingers in his. Hours later, their daughter rested against her chest, wrapped in a pale yellow blanket. Dominic sat beside them, his tattoos visible beneath rolled sleeves, his face transformed by wonder and fear. Abigail placed the baby in his arms. "Are you still afraid love makes you weak?" Dominic looked down as their daughter closed one tiny hand around his finger. His eyes shone, but his voice remained steady, terrified. Then the door opened, and a federal attorney stepped inside, carrying a sealed envelope that would decide whether Dominic could remain with his family. The federal attorney stopped beside the hospital bed and placed the sealed envelope on the small table. Dominic did not reach for it. Their daughter was asleep against his chest, one tiny hand resting over the dark ink on his wrist. "Open it," Abigail said. He broke the seal with one hand. The agreement confirmed that his cooperation had been accepted. He would remain under court supervision, testify against Victor Kane, and permanently surrender control of every illegal operation connected to the Russo organization. The lawful businesses could continue under independent management. Dominic read the final page twice. "You can stay?" Abigail asked. He looked at her, then at the baby. "I can stay. I just cannot be the man I was." Abigail settled deeper against the pillow. "Good. I was not especially fond of that man." A quiet laugh moved through the room. Dominic pulled his chair closer and remained there until morning, learning how to hold a bottle, change a diaper, and survive being judged by a nurse half his size. 10 months later, sunlight filled the Monroe Community Center through a new wall of windows. The building had been repaired, its debts cleared, and its kitchen expanded to serve more families. Abigail directed a new program for pregnant women facing financial hardship. She no longer avoided crowded rooms or lowered her voice when powerful people entered them. Tessa had graduated from nursing school and accepted a position at a children's clinic. Noah had entered a legal security business and was rebuilding trust with his daughter one honest conversation at a time. Eleanor pleaded guilty to tampering with evidence and coercion. Her testimony helped expose Victor's financial network, but it did not erase what she had done. She accepted her sentence without asking Dominic to excuse her. Before leaving court, she gave Abigail a letter for the baby. Abigail placed it in a drawer to be opened when their daughter was old enough to understand that regret and forgiveness were not the same thing. Victor Kane received a long federal sentence after his own records, contracts, and recorded threats were presented in court. Ethan's name was cleared, and the community center established a scholarship in his honor. Dominic sold the remaining family properties tied to his old life and invested the legal proceeds into housing, education, and small businesses across Chicago. He no longer entered rooms expecting silence. He listened more than he spoke. On a warm Saturday afternoon, Abigail found him in the center's garden holding their daughter beneath a string of paper lanterns. Friends, volunteers, and families gathered nearby. Dominic wore a dark suit, but no guards surrounded him. He placed the baby in Tessa's arms, then turned to Abigail. I spent most of my life believing love meant keeping danger away from the people who mattered. He took a breath. You taught me that love also means telling the truth, even when the truth gives someone the power to leave. He lowered himself to one knee and opened a small ring box. Abigail covered her mouth, then glanced at the crowd. You organized this without telling me? Dominic looked almost concerned. I was told surprises are acceptable in this situation. That depends. Are there pancakes involved? No pancakes. Then your chances are excellent. She held out her hand. Yes. Their daughter squealed as the crowd applauded. Dominic rose and kissed Abigail's forehead before slipping the ring onto her finger. Across the garden, a young volunteer dropped a tray and froze as an impatient donor began to scold her. Dominic started forward, but Abigail touched his arm and went first. She helped the girl gather the cups, then faced the donor with calm, steady eyes. Dominic watched her, pride softening every hard line in his face. Once, Abigail had believed strength belonged to people who controlled the room. Now she knew better. Strength was choosing kindness without becoming weak, speaking when silence was easier, and building a home where fear no longer made the decisions.